Welcome back to Sustainability Matters. I'm Tria Case. Today we're taking a closer look at climate justice, which recognizes climate change as an ethical issue that disproportionately impacts marginalized communities. It takes these communities who've contributed the least to the crisis and centers them in decision-making towards a sustainable future. We'll kick things off with a word from Andrew Falzone on how climate inequity shows up in our day-to-day lives and the grassroots efforts helping communities fight back, build resilience, and shape a more just future for all New Yorkers.
Climate change is the big planetary shift. Hotter temperatures, heavier rain, and rising seas. Climate justice is different. It's about who gets hit hardest, why, and whether the protections and benefits reach the people most at risk. In New York City, that can mean your neighborhood shapes your risk. And these gaps didn't appear by accident in the city. Policies like redlining and other discriminatory housing practices shaped where many people could live and where investment flowed. Over time, many low-income communities and communities of color have faced a disproportionate burden of polluting infrastructure and divestment in environmental benefits like parks and natural resources. In 2021, 13 of 19 peaker power plants were located in or within a block of an environmental justice area, which is a neighborhood the city identifies as facing disproportionately high pollution burdens and climate risks. Transportation and land use also matter. Communities of color are disproportionately exposed to emissions from heavy-duty diesel vehicles. And in recent years, the growth of web-based commerce has fueled more last-mile deliveries, warehouse activity, and truck traffic across parts of the city, concentrating pollution and traffic impacts in some neighborhoods. Extreme heat is another clear example. New York City's Heat Vulnerability Index maps show where residents are at higher risk of dying during and right after heat waves, shaped by factors like surface temperature, green space, access to home air conditioning, and income. Heat isn't abstract here, it's a public health threat every summer. Flooding is another risk. The city's Flood Vulnerability Index looks at more than where water goes. It combines exposure with susceptibility to harm and the capacity to recover. So the same storm can leave one area inconvenienced and another area facing damaged homes, displacement, and a longer road back to recovery. So what does justice look like in practice? It means solutions designed with and delivered to the communities carrying the highest risks. Cooling, cleaner air, resilient buildings, and flood protections that reach people on the ground, not just on paper. One coalition pushing that work forward is the New York City Climate Justice Hub, a partnership between the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance and the City University of New York to support community-led climate solutions. The initiative is funded through a 2-year, $4 million grant from the Waverly Street Foundation, and the hub was formally launched in September 2023. The Hub's model flips the script. Frontline organizations help set priorities, and CUNY supplies research capacity through classes, research teams, and student fellowships, so community partners can use research as a tool, not just a report. That can mean practical work like a Sunset Park land use analysis supporting UPROSE's Grid 2.0 or mobility research with El Puente, built to strengthen on-the-ground campaigns with usable data. I'm Andrew Falzone for Sustainability Matters on CUNY TV.
Today I'm joined in studio by a power couple in the climate justice arena, Elizabeth Yeampierre and Eddie Bautista. Elizabeth is a lawyer by training who leads UPROSE, Brooklyn's oldest Latino-based community organization. Eddie has taken a different approach, leading a citywide coalition of frontline environmental activists through the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance. He also recently served on the mayor's transition team. It's great to have you both here. Thank you for coming into studio.
Same here, Tria. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, so when I talk to folks about environmental justice or climate, they rarely talk about abstract ideas. They really talk about transportation in their community, housing in their community, flooding in their community. As you're talking to folks in the community, what are you hearing as the most pressing environmental issues that they're thinking about and facing?
The priorities have shifted in the last year because this is a different time that we're living in, and we can't silo environmental injustice or climate change because it literally is the manifestation of a legacy of harm against the people who have always had access to the worst food, the worst health conditions, the worst housing conditions, and now we're dealing with not only with ice on a regular basis, but recurrent extreme weather events like heat, and other things that are really harming them. We were born in these neighborhoods, we were raised in them, and so it feels like a very personal thing as opposed to people who went to school, studied it, and decided, okay, let me help these people. No, this is our story. We are fighting for our people, for our communities.
How do you see these sort of historical policies and decisions that were made across the city shaping what we're dealing with today?
One of the things that we're constantly telling people is it's all about systems and systemic decisions that have happened over generations, right? Whether it's redlining, whether it's urban renewal, it's a series of systemic government policies that have driven these polluting sources and lack of environmental and climate protection in our communities. Means these are threat multipliers. What's interesting is that both of us have like origin stories that we're still battling now, right? So I grew up in a part of Red Hook right by where Brooklyn Marine Terminal is. And that neighborhood at the time had a sewer reconstruction project that literally opened up sewers around about a dozen blocks. It was at the same time that the fiscal crisis hit, which meant all capital projects across the city were suspended, which meant we had to live with open sewers for 2 or 3 years. Wow. Insane. Fast forward to a task force that was just impaneled by Eric Adams and EDC a year and a half ago that started identifying what to do with Brooklyn Marine Terminal. And the proposal that came out of EDC was to massively build more housing, but housing that's built in an area that doesn't have proper sewer infrastructure. The very thing that displaced my family is still apparently an ongoing issue in that part of the community, right?
Elizabeth, what brought you into this? What sort of got you engaged in thinking about climate justice and environmental issues generally here in New York City?
I grew up in a Black, indigenous, Puerto Rican family that lived in the midst of environmental burdens. I come from struggle, and I thought that the way that I was going to use my education to address historical harms. I thought I was going to be the Puerto Rican Thurgood Marshall. That was my dream. And I came to UPROSE.
I want to stop you.
Yeah.
First of all, so UPROSE, 1966 it started?
It starts in 1966. Yeah. I come in 96.
Okay.
Right? So it starts as a social service organization, mostly from the Puerto Rican community moving up from Red Hook into Sunset Park. It's founded by Puerto Ricans during the Civil Rights Movement. And by the time I come on board, UPROSE has really lost most of its funding. There's a conversation about whether or not it's going to exist. And I am asked to come in to prevent it from disappearing. And it was an unmet need. People were doing youth development. We believed in youth organizing. We wanted to honor the history of the Young Lords, the Black Panthers, the American Indian movement, all of the movements that have been led by young people of color. And the young people were really concerned about the expansion of the Gowanus Expressway. They were concerned about asthma. They were concerned about Sunset Park being in a lead paint belt. It was sort of a wake-up call for me that if you can't breathe, you can't fight for justice. And coming from a home where so many people in my family have problems with their lungs, with the ability to breathe, losing both parents to that. It was sort of like a wake-up moment that there was nothing more fundamental than the right to breathe.
Absolutely.
And so those young people really helped change the culture of practice of the organization, and the organization pivots from being a social service organization to one that is dedicated to environmental and climate justice. And we started by fighting against the siting of a power plant, and we won. Doubling the amount of open space, and we won. Literally, we needed a park. We got that, and we grew as a result of that. And then started thinking forward. What does it look like? How do we envision a community that serves our needs and the future? Like, how do we create that path?
Eddie, so you're bringing together this platform, or knitting together really organizations from across the city, across multiple boroughs, with maybe the same and different issues. What made you feel like that was an important aspect of environmental justice action here in the city?
Sure. Well, NYC-EJA was founded in 1991. It's our 35th anniversary, right? At the time, you were having several what became siting fights. You had waste transfer stations being sited in North Brooklyn. You had sewage treatment plants expansion in the South Bronx. You had power plant sightings. It was all happening in the same handful of communities, all communities of color. And the leaders from these communities started bumping into each other at council hearings, at agency hearings, and they realized that often they were the only people of color there, and they were often the only community people there. Everyone else, the environmental movement in the late 80s, early 90s was largely white, largely professionalized, and it wasn't reflective of what was going on the ground. And these community groups understood that, wait a minute, there are systemic reasons this keeps happening in our same neighborhoods. And we may be effective at stopping the siting of this facility, that transfer station, but if we don't get to the root causes, it's going to continue. And so that led to the founding of NYC-EJA. NYC-EJA basically has two very specific charges, right? One is to identify the systemic reasons why we have all these disparities, whether it's environmental impacts or climate vulnerabilities, whatever it is. What are the reasons we have these disparities? And most importantly, how do we dismantle as many of them as possible? And that's what the journey has been for 35 years. See, during the first Trump term, we actually had a range of victories at the city and state level, right? We managed to pass the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, not just New York State's climate law, but a climate law that is the envy of the other states, right? In New York City, we passed something called the Climate Mobilization Act, which people know as Local Law 97, which attempts to grapple with the sector that creates the largest greenhouse gas emissions, which is the building sector. We got the waste reduction, waste equity law passed. We got commercial waste. All of this happened in 2018, 2019. So we were on a roll, even despite having a hostile Trump first term, right? And then all of a sudden, Eric Adams gets elected, Cuomo resigns, and then if you look at any one of the range of laws we got passed, the last 4 years has been a battle to get them even marginally implemented. We're looking for a much different dynamic with the Mamdani administration.
You have been sitting on the mayor's transition team. What are you seeing? What are you hopeful for?
It was the one bright spot that we had, at least politically, over the last few months, meaning that there was some new blood coming in with a real handle on disparities and a desire to tackle these. We have literally about a dozen or more initiatives that during the Adams years just lay fallow. And so we are really looking, like our work for the next few years is like, it's a story of completing unfinished business. Like we have, commercial waste zones, we have Local Law 97, we've got the state climate law, we've got waste equity, we've got renewable Rikers, and we're looking forward to Mayor Mamdani as a partner in all this.
If there was a single policy or a package of policies that you think would help frontline communities in a significant way that you would want to see come forward now, what would that be in the city?
I would say that what I'm hoping with this new administration is that they really embrace community-based planning. What we're seeing with agencies like the New York Economic Development Corporation is taking the industrial waterfront and turning it into sort of an opportunity for developers and WeWork spaces. And so the fact that right now we're seeing a consortium like Batworks that is made up of companies that are coming from outside of New York to bring things like AI in means that this city has failed to look at solutions that are local. as a vehicle for a just transition. These are opportunities for climate adaptation, mitigation, and resilience. This is an opportunity for green reindustrialization. And local communities like Sunset Park have plans. They have comprehensive plans that would operationalize a just transition. These are plans that would help to decarbonize the community, provide jobs, prevent displacement, check. Seriously?
Absolutely.
But, you know, climate solutions aren't always, climate solutions can become environmental justice problems. So, like, for example, when we were negotiating with Equinor, offshore wind, and that comes out of our fight against Industry City and that rezoning, they were bringing their ships from Norway, and we said, well, those ships can provide renewable energy, they'll bring all the supplies, but they will sit on our waterfront and drop tons of NOx and SOx in our lungs, and then it becomes an environmental justice problem. So what happens now is that those ships go electric when they get to the Verrazano. That is an environmental solution, a justice solution. So I think that there is a distinction in terms of priorities. So I think that is an important conversation for people to understand the distinction between. And then also that the environmental justice movement and the climate justice movement are led by the front line, and that's problematic for people who have always seen themselves as the decision makers, the power breakers in our community, the power makers in our community. You know, they want to lead, and they want us to be sort of the passive recipients of their good intentions. And what climate is telling us right now in this moment is that we need to work with each other in a way that is radically different than the way we have in the past. So I just wanted to make that distinction.
You two are both deeply involved in the climate justice movement and have been for some time. What is it like to be involved in this movement together as a couple?
Invigorating is probably the most accurate way. It's a challenge in part because, you know, we always have to ensure that we are representing our organizations appropriately and adequately. With my organization is that we're set up to be supportive and link different community-based organizations and creating platforms and campaigns that we could work together for these systemic problems that we see. And Elizabeth has her own organization with her own board of directors and follows a very specific vision, right? But you tell me if I got it right.
UPROSE is, the heart of UPROSE is organizing and culture and arts. It's how we do the work that we do. That's not something that NYC-EJA does. They do organizing, but they don't do culture and arts. For example, this past Sunday, there were salsa classes at UPROSE, right? And people may think, what does salsa have to do with climate change? Well, we're going to embrace joy, and we're going to come together, and in those spaces where we're embracing culture and arts, you're going to learn about climate change too. So I think we have our own different way of doing things, but what we do believe in is in movement spaces and consensus. We do believe in the power of the collective. And so NYC-EJA is a place where we are able to process the power of the collective. If UPROSE in Sunset Park is not going to take a position that is going to harm people in the South Bronx. And we only know about what's happening in the South Bronx or in Staten Island or in other communities that we love that are our sister communities because it's NYC-EJA. So we work with each other citywide, statewide, nationally, because the answers are in the collective, right?
As husband and wife, it is. It's hard sometimes because the work is so deep and it's hard to look at it as not life or death sometimes, you know. And you know, when you bring it home, it's hard sometimes to separate the work.
It is.
But you know, we've been doing it long enough to know that, you know, we need Netflix.
Some people, some people get that nudge at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you're like, oh, and he's like, so what about that waste transfer station? And that's it. That's like
that happened once in 1999.
Every Father's Day has been about getting legislation passed, like breaking night on Father's Day.
That's Albany, yeah.
Yeah. So like it's. I think the fact that we are a couple makes it easier, I think, to be able to hold a lot of work.
Agreed. Absolutely. Yes. Totally.
Yeah. No. It's really exciting to be able to be either, you know, at a rally or anywhere that you are and see somebody that you love holding the mic. You feel like this is love in action, right? You know, the work that we do is not a job. This is a calling. And this is not a 9 to 5. We don't do it for the props. We do it because this is about love.
I will say that what's really been unusual, I think, about our marriage and the work is that not only do we have all the usual kind of tensions and struggles and challenges that any married couple has to do, but I think we're both fans of each other, right? Like I have heard Elizabeth give talks now for 36 years, and I find myself stopping and listening every single time because, you know, Elizabeth is a visionary. She's just someone who has not just a visionary mind, but a warrior heart. And it's kind of hard not to keep loving that and admiring that. And so it makes for, I think, an interesting marriage, not just because of our love for each other, but I think there is a professional respect that, I'll listen to Elizabeth's talks till, you know.
Well, he's a strategist, and I'm gonna tell you, when I see him, I'm like, that's what's up right there. That is a badass.
Nice.
And
Can we say that on CUNY? Badass?
yeah, we can say that.
Okay.
I love it. I love the mutual respect and appreciation you two so clearly have and have always had for each other, and the work that you both do. What is your recommendation to people to just sort of make sure that if they're getting involved in the right place and in something that really can help and make a difference? What are the things they should be looking for?
I think if they can reach us on Instagram, we're UPROSE Brooklyn, or info@uprose.org. We're always open for volunteers. We've got a lot of learning circles. There's a lot of activities. They're all posted on social media. And there are a lot of different kinds of ways that people can get involved.
And as for NYCE-EJA, it's a little different in that we're a membership-based coalition. So we encourage people, because we're a 5-borough coalition, is if you're interested in any of the work, and go to our website, NYCE-EJA.org. There is an environmental or climate justice group near you, I imagine. And I would urge people, if you're in one of the neighborhoods of a NYCE-EJA member, contact them, because there is something groundbreaking, exciting, and revolutionary happening in each one of our organizations, and there's room for everyone.
Absolutely. I want to thank both of you for coming into the studio today, but also for the incredible leadership that you both show in this arena and beyond. Thank you for what you do. And I will say also that you make it so clear that environmental justice is really about real people. It's about real issues, about real communities, and it comes from real communities that are taking actions that make a big difference in our lives. So thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Tria. Sustainability matters. That's a must-see in our household, so thank you.
Thank you. Now, Kyra Baytal is going to show us simple, impactful choices we can make every day to support our neighborhoods and the environment in our Green to Go segment.
Are you looking to get involved in climate justice, but don't know where to start when the problems can feel so massive? Start local. Plug into the work already happening in your borough. Check out organizations like UPROSE and NYC-EJA and see how you can help their efforts. Join forces with the No BK pipeline movement, which has successfully rallied in the past against a 7-mile fracked gas pipeline in North Brooklyn. That's now back on the table. Are you a designer, a writer, a social media whiz? Local groups need help with everything, from grant writing to website updates. Your skills are a powerful resource. You can also call your local elected officials, send an email, demand action on city legislation that protects our air, water, and green spaces. With just a little effort, you can make a difference in your community.
Keep the conversation going. Follow us or send us a message on social media, and download our CUNY TV app.